What do you look for when you buy a game? Is it gameplay length? Maybe the quality of the game? Or is it when you can come back to the game later, like a live service game? Or would you prefer something with a definitive ending? It could be any one of these, perhaps some other factors, or just everything combined. No matter what, it's the question of what you want to spend your money on. The length of a game and people's opinions on the length seems to change a lot. A lot of games used to be short, especially older games, and while they were very short, they also were unforgiving in difficulty, and were built to eat up time with challenges that require pinpoint accuracy or knowledge of the challenge or obstacle existing before you even reach it. Today, the debate on a game's length is often a mixture of variables due to how games have deeper gameplay, better storytelling, and an actual pace to them that makes the story feel good. As gaming itself has expanded its audience, a lot of games have taken the route of becoming easier, as technology has advanced to the point where more games are trying to tell narratives that don't require the most complex and difficult gameplay so that the average user can actually finish the game. What this winds up doing is making a lot of games seem like a cakewalk, since the balance between difficulty and game length is something a lot of people don't consider. Open world games have a habit of including ridiculous content load. The games themselves tend to be not very difficult and instead entice you with the vast amount of content that will keep you playing. So the game's length is technically extended by all the areas to explore, the amount of time it takes to traverse the world, and a batch of assorted and typically useless collectibles. This can result in a lot of variable times to the game's length. However, as time has gone on, the joy and excitement people used to have and feel towards these games and the length of them and the expansive content for them has diminished. One of the reasons for this is the amount of content that comes from the copy-paste filler that serves very little purpose. The Ubisoft style content, as many seem to call it. This plagues the open world genre and concept of video games. While there are many good games out there, which are also open world, it is pretty easy to spot the random assorted collectibles that pad out the game's 100% length. The easiest example to show people's lack of interest in increasingly longer games is Dying Light 2's tweet about how the game would take 500 hours to beat on 100%. In my opinion, I think that's asking a bit much of people. While you can say, granted, a small percentage of players will even bother doing that, asking for 500 hours of your time as a player is both a boon and a bane. Obviously, 500 hours is a long time, and especially for someone who works an average job. If you've got nothing better to do than play video games, I can understand how this might seem like nothing, or just a long game for you to complete that you spent $60 on. But the average person probably doesn't really have time for this, with how cramped their schedules may be. JRPGs are a common topic on this channel, and of course, my focus for long games. I like a game with a good length, but this is assuming the length has a reason. Some stories need that kind of pacing to make them feel good. Even most JRPGs don't stretch beyond the 200-hour mark for 100% completion, but the dedication to completing the main story for most JRPGs, especially modern ones, is fairly long. Meanwhile, games like DMC5 have a relatively short runtime and are still critically acclaimed by the time they release. A lot of major games hit the 10 to 25 hour mark for story and still get good reviews, despite being $60 games. And I think this has to do with the fact a lot of studios, albeit not all of them, are still stuck on the idea that people genuinely care about a game's length. And that's not to say it's not a factor, but that is to say that too much of something can be a bad thing, as with all things. If your game is good, a lot of the time people will overlook the length. If the main complaint for the game was, I wish it was longer, but not, it needed to be longer, then that's a better impression than the game was pretty bad or the game was pretty boring. The length of your game should be based on a few factors, but for the most part, crafting a game should be about making the player feel satisfied by the end. If you can pace your story in 4 hours, then you should make a game that's 4 hours in length. If your story is presented better in 20 to 30 hours, then the game should stretch for that long. Of course, that is contingent on the ability to stretch the game out for that period of time. There are other things to consider besides what you want to do versus what you can do. The length of a game is contingent on keeping the player engaged, and games that pad out length with no factors that will keep someone entertained for the entire time, and are just long for the sake of nothing, are kind of the problem and the main thing I'm addressing here. And this problem of having all of this filler content is the reason why people are so against this wave of Ubisoft recycled open world formula crap. It's the point where people are saying not everything needs to be open world versus the outcry a long time ago, probably even almost 10 years ago, when people wanted everything to be open world. We now see that the result tends to be a less than stellar and less than interesting open world, because they're trying to create a world that has content for people to do in it, but there really is no actual content that they're going to put in that isn't recycled, filler, collectible crap. Unique side quests and things like that really are the driving force of side content in video games, where you have these interesting side quests that tell stories, and those are the things that people are interested in more so than a side quest that functions as filler content. So things like Ghost of Tsushima contains different side quests that revolve around these other characters in the story, and they're not 100% important to the main story. They don't need to be there, but by doing their side quests, you open up another layer to the storytelling, and another layer to their own stories that they have that don't just center around the main character. Anyways, it's not that people are against longer games. It's that the most common type of longer game is centered around filler content that hasn't evolved to match the times. It's harder to get people to dedicate their time to these longer games because many people lack the free time to play these games. The reason why people who play JRPGs don't resist this longer content grind as much is because typically the game's length is due to the pacing of its plotline. It is very rare for a JRPG to feel ridiculously padded. That being said, it still does feel padded a lot of the time. There are still parts of the story that could likely be shortened or don't need to happen because sometimes they spend a little too much time restating what has happened. But the opposite also happens, where players feel like a game is too short for its storytelling. So what the acceptable length is depends on a lot of factors, but in the end the player should be satisfied with the game they played and the price they paid for it. It isn't wrong to make longer games, nor is it something that people are really against. But padding your game to exceptionally long lengths, for the sake of making it longer, just isn't interesting to many people anymore. So maybe next time you're looking for a game, the length may not matter as much. So really what I'm trying to say with this video is essentially that game length isn't really as important as it used to be. I think that a lot of people still look at a game, look at the length and say, well, I should be getting $1 per hour out of this. But a lot of people have kind of moved on from that train of thought because it's just not feasible in today's world. More often than not, people find that developing games is just expensive and time consuming, and to stretch a game 20-hour experience to a 60-hour experience just doesn't work a lot of the time. I mean, hell, Sony's been putting out games that are 20 to 30 hours at most, and people are still buying them. And that's for a good reason. They're good games. It's the same way Nintendo puts out games that really aren't up to 60 hours. Really, the only kind or genre of games you're going to be getting 60 hours out of are typically JRPGs, and that's assuming you sit there and listen to all of the dialogue. What really is an acceptable length for a game is just the length at which a player will feel satisfied by the end of it. It's not really about one factor or the other. It's about the combination of these factors that give you that satisfaction. We don't want filler content anymore. And I don't know if Dying Light 2's 500 hours of content is actually filler or anything like that. I'm not going to make judgments about the game before it's out. It's not really a game that I'm looking for. It's just one I used as an example because I saw it recently. The point essentially is that there's no reason to be concerned about the length of a game, because when the game is too long, people just won't be interested in it. And when a game is too short, it has the same effect. Some people will just wait for the price to drop. They're just not as interested in it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think that games should be longer? Do you think that a lot of games actually lack the length that they need to be interesting? Do you think that a lot of games should be longer for their story? Or do you think games should be shorter? Do you think we're kind of traversing into the wrong territory, and that games are becoming too long, and that all it winds up doing is making you add things to your backlog instead of being able to finish games that you're already playing now? And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video goes up the week I'm recording this. I'm trying to get this video out before Monster Hunter comes out, because I know what that's going to do to me. But yeah, I'll see you guys next week with another video. Thanks for watching.